Hello and welcome to another fully live Q&A episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Kody Kinzie. I'm a security researcher at Varonis, and today, per usual, we have my good friend and fellow hacker, Alex Lin, here to answer your questions and talk about hacker stuff. So thank you to all of our other friends who've joined us today. If you're in the chat, we appreciate it. Big shout out to Zam, our moderator, who's helping keep things civil in the chat. And if you have a great question during the stream today, make sure to shout it out in the chat. If we don't get time to ask it, then you can also leave it as a comment and we'll make sure we get to those on the show. So thank you so much to everyone joining us. We had a great show last time. We got lots of excellent questions. So we have a lot to go off of. And we already have a couple of people in the chat who have asked some really good questions about Wi-Fi, which we will get to very shortly. But first, just to give people a little bit of time to join the chat and everything, we'd like to talk about the research that Alex and I are doing every week because we are security researchers. We are constantly working on new and interesting stuff. And we've kind of diverged a little bit. Alex has been working on Wi-Fi Nugget stuff. I have been obsessed with QR codes and doing QR code related stuff. But Alex, what have you been working on this week?
Besides working under a heavy hunk of metal, aka our broken car, which has taken up like the past 3 days, I've also done some new developments for the Wi-Fi Nugget. So as some of you guys might know, we've been working on the Rubber Nugget software for the Wi-Fi Nugget, which lets you deploy Ducky script-based payloads on the Nugget. But I've been working on implementing multitasking, or rather using multitasking to implement a web application on the Nugget that lets you deploy, edit, and run payloads from a web browser.
Yeah,
so I've been using...
I was just going to say, so in completely simple talk, that just means that we're trying to create a web interface on the Nugget so you can run payloads just by joining a Wi-Fi access point and then on your phone or on your computer getting access to an interface that lets you do everything you could want to do on a human interface device attack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like one of the issues I ran into was like with the standard interface that we have on the Nugget, you can just use the buttons to deploy payloads. But if you want to deploy from the website, I ran into an issue where the ESP32S2 had crashed because one of the like interrupts that's being used to run both the web application and also deploy payloads like collide somehow. So I couldn't do them both at the same time. So I needed to use a multitasking library in order to switch back and forth between which of these two processes would be running. So once you deploy a payload from the website, I think it was Xtask or Vtask or some built-in function thanks to the ESP32 real-time operating system that lets you swap between different tasks. So if you deploy a payload from the website, it calls an interrupt that temporarily stops the web application. Then it calls a function to deploy the payload. And then once the payload finishes running, then it restarts the web application task. So that was an interesting hurdle to get around.
So you had to figure out how to basically schedule two different tasks running on the CPU at the same time in order to get the web interface and the attack working without crashing.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have them like somehow both run at the same time, since it's kind of annoying that there's like some downtime on the website while the payload is running. I'm sure there's a way to circumvent that since there's like multiple cores on the ESP, and I'm not like entirely familiar with how the different interrupt processes work quite yet, but for now that's how I'm getting around the problem and it seems to work.
Cool. All right, so for me, I've been working on a couple different things. For one, our good friend Nick, who is currently, I think, our best performing video on Hack5, on our team anyway, got a phishing text today. And he got it apparently from himself. It came from his own phone number, and it was just this weird link. So he sent it to me. I tried to open it up in OWASP Zap, and you can see here that it didn't really go anywhere. Like after poking around a little bit, I got 404s on everything. So it seemed that unlike the last one, where I got to poke around and attack stuff and do that whole video on how I got to fill their database with the bmovie script, I didn't get to do anything. Maybe they saw me coming. I don't know. But it seemed like this whole thing was taken down before I got to flood anybody with the bmovie script. So I was very disappointed. But that's what I did earlier today. And then also I've been using the 3D printers behind us to work on a couple just fun projects, such as this wind station, which I've decided to solar power by ripping apart this solar powered light. So by taking out the solar panel, adding a charging regulator, and then adding a big battery that used to be inside that, I've created a little wind station, a weather station that also includes a wind measuring device, And all of this is 3D printed with the exception of a small skate bearing, like the same kind you would use for a skateboard in here. And this is actually all 3D printed. So just making a bunch of fun stuff in CircuitPython. CircuitPython makes it really easy to work with these sorts of electronics and sensors and put together something that in my case is just going to broadcast the current wind speed, temperature, and humidity as a Wi-Fi network. I have this running back in Montana and it's really cool, so I wanted to make one here in Los Angeles as well. And it's a really cool way of being able to monitor the current temperature outside without having to even go to a website. You just open up your Wi-Fi and you can see the temperature right there. So that's what I've been working on this week, as well as QR code stuff. So let me see if I can find it on my screen.
Let me see if I can find one of those abysmal things that you printed out.
Oh, yeah. No, that's okay. That's okay. So over on my screen, you can see that I have figured out how to use CircuitPython. And of course, there's a library for this. I didn't write it. I just found it and figured out how to use your examples. But I figured out how to generate these QR codes on this super tiny screen. So Alex and I previously talked about whether or not it was even possible to make a QR code this small. But it turns out, yeah, you totally can. So this is really cool because QR codes, as I've been studying, are able to have a bunch of different types of data stored in them. In this case, I think this one just goes to hackcat or hackgat or something.com. But because we can pop these up, we can do all sorts of cool things. Like, for example, I'm going to be creating a Wi-Fi honeypot that connects to your home network and will go off anytime someone tries to access it to let you know if like a nosy neighbor is on your Wi-Fi poking around, or maybe if your roommate is just trying to log into something that looks like a webcam maybe. So in this case, what it needs to do is direct you to a web interface, and it can create its own Wi-Fi network, but trying to copy that down can be kind of complicated. So why not just make it so someone scans the QR code, it connects them to a Wi-Fi network, and then they're able to tell this thing what their Wi-Fi credentials are, and it can join your network and do its job. So I set out to see if you could do that. And I also ran into some stumbles. By the way, if you're using CircuitPython and you just get M105 over and over and over, it's because you have Kira open, because you like 3D printing, and it thinks that your CircuitPython device is a 3D printer, and it will just probe it over and over and over, asking for the nozzle temperature. Ask me how I know. This has happened to many of my friends. So this has happened to you using CircuitPython. That was the answer. And that delayed me on this project quite a bit, because I couldn't figure out why it was crashing. But I was able to generate these QR codes that have specific data types that will actually call or FaceTime Tim Cook. And my friend who has an iPhone scanned this, and it immediately launched into calling. I think he might have tapped it, but it immediately launched into attempting to call Tim Cook's Apple email address. And nobody picked up, but my friend was very startled and did not want to get in trouble in front of Mr. Cook. So
was that doxed or is that publicly available?
Oh, it's just like Tim Cook at apple.com. I'm just guessing, doxed. Yeah, but so these are just some examples of how you can format data in a QR code to launch an application. You can provide a geolocation where if you want to tell someone where something is, you can provide a very exact geolocation. It will open it in a maps application and pinpoint it right there. You can provide a Wi-Fi network, so that'll make it so someone, their phone will attempt to join the Wi-Fi network, and you can make that malicious too. And you can even make it a hidden Wi-Fi network, so it actually makes their device constantly beacon out that name forever, so you can actually track them. So there's ways of using QR codes to be pretty sneaky and sometimes even malicious, and I've been just exploring how you can use them to help people set things up and be useful, but also the different ways you can abuse QR codes to do things like launch phone calls, send pre-formatted email addresses with like a carbon copy that's like hidden. Like there's all sorts of ways of formatting this data to make it launch different stuff, and it's been really cool playing with which ones we can generate on the little Wi-Fi Nugget and which ones we can print out and scan either as a stencil or as just a print. So that's been my research for the week, and now let's get to some of the questions in the chat. So assume now everybody's had a good amount of time to join. So one of the first questions was about WPA2. Somebody was saying that it is really difficult to attack WPA2, and it looks like the only thing that works is actually just doing the brute force attack. So actually going ahead and trying every single password after you get the handshake. And of course that is, now that processing power is so cheap, a really good way of doing it most of the time, because it does work, and provided you can just get like an AWS instance or something like that in order to crack a password, it's not that hard to throw a lot of processing power that's not yours at a problem like this nowadays. Now, if you don't want to go that route, the question also mentioned WPS Pixie. So WPS Pixie, or the Pixie Dust attack, is a really cool attack that works on maybe between 40% of routers, depending on where you are, where it's able to just get the password because of a feature that's enabled called WPS Setup. Now, this is really cool when it works, but the question asker points out, who's M. Baguette, points out that it doesn't work all the time. And this is an old exploit, and a lot of routers have been updated to fix this. So what actually works? Well, okay, my favorite attack against Wi-Fi currently, and this is kind of timeless, is the phishing attack. So using something like a microcontroller, is this a D1 or an S2 Nugget?
I believe that's a
D1.
S2.
A D1? It's a D1.
Whoa.
Yeah,
it's a D1.
It's a secret D1.
Wow.
So using something like the D1 Mini, which is the microcontroller powering this Nugget, you could kick somebody off of a Wi-Fi network, so they're no longer able to connect to their Wi-Fi network. This is WPA2, and then create a clone of that Wi-Fi network that looks like the router is going through an update or something, like an open network with the same name. And if they connect to it, it says, the router is updated and needs your password to reboot. Please enter your password. And then you type in your Wi-Fi password and boom, your internet access is restored. But what really happened here? Well, this little microcontroller that has a Wi-Fi chip on it created a Wi-Fi interface while simultaneously kicking you off of your Wi-Fi network continuously and made it look like your router was updating. And for people who don't know how this process works, it might seem like that's the case. Of course, if you're a more tech-savvy person, you would plug a cable into your router and try to figure out what was going on, and you wouldn't just type in your password. But this attack has actually worked against me back when I worked at a startup. So I know that this is effective because when people are stressed out and they're not thinking about security, this sort of easy solution you provide them to fix their problem is often something that people who are just trying to problem solve will take as an easy way of getting out of a problem where suddenly their internet's not working. So I would say Wi-Fi phishing is still my favorite way to break into a Wi-Fi network or get a password. It's much more kind of up close and personal than doing just a grab and then trying to crack it. But social engineering is really super powerful. And in the end of the day, the password is stored in many places, both in the hash that you can try to crack and also in the heads of the people who are at the business and, maybe using that password all the time. So if you can get one of them to just give it to you, it's a lot easier than using math to try to brute force it out of a hash. Just my opinion. Alex, you have a thought on that?
Generally, social engineering is quicker than offline cracking Wi-Fi passwords. I've had better luck with honestly default Wi-Fi credentials because I find just a lot of Wi-Fi networks. People are just too complacent about setting them up. They'll leave it open as my Spectrum Wi-Fi or whatever the default setup is, and those usually have passwords that are fairly easy to crack. I see also from the same user, Baguette. They asked about WPA3. The thing that sucks is WPA3 implements a new encryption standard, which I think is called SAE or something like that, that specifically prevents offline cracking. So it sucks to see that go, but of course that still works against WPA2. And I think also against the mode of WPA3 that can be enabled where, I think it's called transition mode, where you can still like with WPA2 devices. So there are still some attacks that are this is susceptible to. Yeah, and downgrading attacks will generally always work, or at least should always work. So you should be able to switch the security back to WPA2 if you pretend to be a device that doesn't support WPA3, and this can be an attack vector that makes it all the old attacks come back into scope. So that's very useful. Yeah. So another question from the chat, and this is kind of funny because somebody else actually asked me this, is after I did that video where I stuffed the crypto scammers website full of fake cryptocurrency addresses. So I basically made up addresses according to a regex. So I randomly generated them. They're asking, if you find a website that accepts currency as cryptocurrency as a payment, could you just regex a random cryptocurrency address and then have that go through as a payment and basically make a payment on behalf of someone else by guessing their secret key? The odds of that are super, super, super low. If you were able to infinitely try it, maybe eventually you would hit one. But I believe the way that these are generated, it purposely makes it so that just randomly stumbling across them would be extremely unlikely. If you did get lucky and that happened, though, that would be very funny. And I do have to preface this saying I know very little about cryptocurrency because I'm still not convinced it's real. Alex? You would need both the wallet address and also the pre-shared key. So the odds of you getting two of those that work. I think Did I say pre-shared key? I meant to say private key. I think that in itself is 64 bits long, so that's a really long thing to crack. And then the wallet key, the cryptocurrency wallet address itself is already something like 20 bits. So the odds of getting a random combination of those that works is low. You should get a lottery ticket. Yeah. You should just get a lottery ticket. Somebody else asked what my shirt says. This is my favorite shirt that Veronis has given me, and it just says "Life's a Breach." And then it has a nice little beach scene. Alex thought it meant something else, but clearly it's a beach. Sure. Yeah. Where's a good place to research QR stuff? So I found, I'll probably drop this link in the chat, but I found a really good reference website on GitHub that goes through all the different standards. And what's interesting about QR code standards is they're not unified. There's no one
agency that says the way to format QR code data. There's just popular standards that have kind of been created and then adopted by cell phones as a way of scanning and processing QR codes. So that includes contact cards, addresses, emails, launching applications like FaceTime or like some other application on the phone. It allows you to format data in a couple different ways, and I will try to drop this in chat, but if you just look it up and then specifically look for the GitHub repository of different QR code data formats, there's a really good list of all the different ones you can do. I've been popping up all kinds of random stuff on my phone and just seeing, like, does it really launch a website? Does it go to a YouTube video? Like, how does this work? And it's really interesting to see the different ways you can make a device react just by formatting the data in a QR code slightly differently. Really, really cool. And then other people are asking about the Crome Zero Day. I don't know anything about it. I don't know how to deploy it, and that's not exactly my field of research. So since I'm mostly like a Wi-Fi and hardware person, unfortunately, I am not the person to ask. So it's not because we can't talk about it. It's because I literally don't know. All right.
Someone asks about your B-movie script video. Couldn't a scammer notice that there's so many invalid addresses, then just filter everything from that IP? Can you spam the scammer with fake source IPs?
Yes, that's a really good question. So in I thought the answer to this was no, but I did a lab in, I think it was the Portswigger labs, where you learn how to bypass authentication stuff, where somebody actually did this, and it had a IP ban, but by using the forwarded by flag in a request, I can basically take a request I'm sending, add manually a forwarded by, and then input an IP address, and then send it, and the receiving host, if they accept that flag, should then log my IP address as being from this other source. Now, why is that allowed? That seems really weird, right? Well, there's a lot of different layers of the internet that are there to provide speed, transparency, all sorts of stuff. And in order to prevent something really important on the internet from getting banned, like a load balancer or something else that's taken my message and then maybe passed it through another layer, they use this forwarded by flag to identify the source of the message. And that allows, if you were to be IP banned, them to IP ban a specific user and not an entire load balancer or something else on the internet that's proxying the connection in order to provide speed or some other benefit. And there's lots of different services that do this. So if an application does accept the forwarded by flag, then yeah, I could absolutely get around a scammer being able to filter this out by randomly generating IP addresses in a certain range according to a second regex. And I could step up my attack on the, I think you called it being in the pool. And be able to send more accurate or more realistic looking requests to make it more difficult for the scammer to filter through what is just randomly generated fake cryptocurrency wallet addresses and what will be real. So finding ways of making it difficult for them to programmatically filter out our fake requests is a really good idea. And that's one that I think I really like because it is in fact possible to do this. And I seriously doubt that the attackers have built very much protection into their database because it's not really the most important part of their phishing scam. Well, I mean, actually it is, but I don't think they were thinking about that.
There's also some cool sort of like fuzzers that exist. One of my favorites that we briefly talked about before was like Trevor Proxy that allows you to like fuzz certain attributes that are made in web requests. So you can change like your user agent, your IP address, and like other stuff like that completely programmatically. So if you're making requests like this, whether it's like to brute force the website or if you're just like reverse scamming the scammer or just sending them like the B-movie script, it lets you just like swap out these different parameters and have it look like it's coming from somewhere else that it's not.
Another question is China bad or Russia worse? I didn't really pay much attention to the Olympics, so I'm not sure how things came out. You would have to look it up. I haven't been watching the results. Also, the big question is at what? I'm assuming you mean the Olympic Games, but who knows?
I think they mean ping pong.
Oh,
I'd say
ping
Russia
pong. I would say, yeah. Well, there's a lot of debate about that.
Yeah.
All right.
Someone asked about some Nugget stuff, if the Nugget can capture WPA handshakes. Do we know anything about that?
No. So currently the ESP32S2 is a really interesting and new chip that does Wi-Fi stuff, and it can do a lot of the stuff that the ESP32 could do, but because they're so different, currently, I haven't seen any research into capturing handshakes on this particular microcontroller. Of course, we are very interested in this, but since we're mostly focused on human interface device attacks right now, it means that we haven't really taken a look at this too much, just because it's a lot of work to do all of this stuff. So we're going to be looking into that soon because it should theoretically be possible, but because the chip is so new, I haven't seen people publishing the same sort of things that have been available for the ESP32. So just an interesting note.
Someone asks how we got into cybersecurity/hacking, and what were your first steps to further educate yourselves in this field?
So my first steps to educate myself in cybersecurity were to learn about it, specifically the parts that made sense to me and that I could understand, work on usually Raspberry Pi based projects, and practice running things and turning around and explaining them to other beginners. So I started making posts on Nullbyte, and the ability to learn something and then turn around and give myself a little test on it by writing up like basically a little essay on it plus step-by-step instructions was really cool because it allowed me to make sure I understood the subject before I moved on, and it was, in that case, a paid way that I could take on new challenges and things I'd never done before and then explain them to other people who are in the same situation as me. That got me started on a cybersecurity career because I was able to grow my experience bit by bit, and I was kind of paid to do so, so kind of honestly felt like I was in school. And then over time, I was able to eventually start going back to school for programming. I think that was really important for me because it also taught me that there's two different flavors of hackers. There's programmers and electronics people. There's electrical engineers and people who like making things with their hands. And I kind of found out that I was a little bit more of that kind of hacker than I was a programmer, like I thought when I went into school. So the experience of getting to meet other people and find out that I actually do like hardware a lot and it resonates with me and it's really satisfying landed me in a field that I never really thought I would be in when I started just making tutorials. So that's how I got where I am now.
Oh yeah, there's definitely two different like flavors of hacking. I've been more into hardware hacking recently. That's actually how I got started. I got started just like trying to break things that I already had around me. So I initially got into hardware hacking. I think in like junior high, we had like these clunky like TI-84 calculators that my friend and I were like trying to modify to put in like a Wi-Fi chip and like microcontrollers to do like all sorts of crazy stuff, and like modifying them to do like cool stuff. Yeah, so that taught me a little bit about like hardware hacking, and that sort of segued into me learning about learning to work with like microcontrollers, and then that eventually butted into me getting into programming and learning how to use like low-cost microcomputers like the Raspberry Pi to do hacking stuff.
Null, let your friend talk. All right, I need to address this. My name is not and never has been Null. I did think it was very funny to refer to myself as Null and call all the people who are watching the show the Bytes. But since we're no longer on Nullbyte, that's not my name. But still, I got it. Okay.
Nice.
Yeah, I do see your comment, Corey. And no, you're not on my target list. I'm far too busy. All right, let's take a question from one of the questions that was left as a YouTube comment. I always encourage people to leave comments there, so we will get to them. So what's the first one?
Cool. Someone asks, have you heard of George Hotz?
GeoHot, of course I
Yeah.
have.
Known for jailbreaking first iPhones and the company he started for car autopilot. Because your talk about jailbreaking Teslas reminded me of him. I've seen some of his stuff pop up from time to time. I forget what specifically, but do you have anything to say about that?
You are too young to know most of the stuff that GeoHots did. So my first time using SSH was, I think, in like 2009, maybe like a little before that. I think actually substantially before that, jailbreaking like the second iPhone using an exploit developed by GeoHot. So I have been using this guy's stuff for a long time. I've kind of kept up with them and seen all the stuff he's done. So yeah, dude's really cool. I mean, I don't know about personally, but at least the work that he's done has gone back, and probably actually, now that I think of it, one of my earliest hacking experiences was maintaining a jailbroken iPhone for like 5 years. It was brutal. If you updated it once by accident, everything would stop working. But I loved having access to an iPhone and being able to get into the internal system, run Linux programs. It was super cool. And it was my first experience working with stuff that was like Linux. So it was a very interesting way of getting started with hacking, buying like a device that doesn't want to be locked down and then just making it be that way. And this was all enabled by GeoHots. So yeah, I've heard of this guy, and the stuff he's doing is very cool. So Good reference.
Should we take another question?
Yeah, let's take it.
Okay. This one's on one of our videos demonstrating how to use a Wi-Fi duck. Someone says, "What idiot wouldn't notice an unknown USB connected to his laptop?" I think the point is you don't leave it plugged in that conspicuously. It's like to quickly deploy an attack and then get out of there.
Yeah. So let's talk about the scenario here, and this equally applies to the Wi-Fi Nugget. So you could be talking just as much smack about the Wi-Fi Nugget. So let's say I see this computer left out at a coffee shop. I'm like, I'm an evil hacker. I want into that computer because there's something in there I want, or maybe I'm following this guy for some reason. Who knows? Either way, I want to break into that computer as fast as possible, but I did not know what kind of computer was going to be here until I got here. So let's say that I didn't know it was going to be a Linux computer. I was expecting a Mac OS computer. Well, that would be a big problem most of the time because I would have to sit down and rewrite my code. But because I'm able to store multiple payloads on this, I can do one of two things. I can either plug it in and then kind of hover around it, wait for it to start up and press the button, or I can plug it in very quickly, walk away, and then from a distance, trigger the remote payload, have it run, and basically be able to pick from any of the payloads I have already on the device. So, oh good, I have a Linux payload stored right here. I can trigger that specific payload for the computer I just got access to, just serendipitously, that I couldn't really have predicted what operating system it was going to have beforehand. And I can trigger that payload fast, remotely, without having to hover over this computer. So in this case, I wanted to plug it in, go sit down somewhere else so nobody sees me, like sitting over by this victim computer, press the button to run the payload, and then go back and grab it. I actually used phishing line in this, thinking it was very sneaky. Unplug it all serendipitously. So if someone were to just run to the restroom, and nobody's going to tell you, hey, I think that I saw that dude sitting by your computer for a full minute. No, it's just going to be someone walking by, plugging the thing in, sitting down, pressing a button, and walking back and unplugging it. So you're really minimizing how much time you're spending in a dangerous position of actually being in proximity and physically connected to that computer. Now, would it be ideal to just plug it in and have it run instantly? Yeah, but you never know what kind of operating system you're going to run up against. Your rebuttal, Alex?
Yeah, also, like, lots of times, I guess, like, in the workplace, you'll just see, like, towers that are, like, deployed randomly. So something like this is feasible where you can just, like, have, like, a Wi-Fi implant that's just, like, sitting in the back of, like, a computer tower that's just, like, off in a corner. And no one would bat an eye or, like, even notice that. Especially when it's, like, a small tool like this.
Somebody's saying, Parrot OS on the Raspberry Pi 4. I think your caps lock is stuck. Be sure, do it.
Yeah,
I mean, I personally run Monjero on the Raspberry Pi 4 and the Raspberry Pi 400, which, by the way, is Arch. So now you know. But you can run Parrot Security OS as well. They have it for the Raspberry Pi, and it works really well, and it's very slick as well. I like it. So it's not a question, but yes is the answer. All right, what's the next question with the question mark behind it?
Is it possible to put the whole B movie in a QR code? I need to know. Thank you.
That's such a good question.
Maybe.
Finally we're asking the important questions here. So no, I don't think it's possible to put the entire B movie script in a QR code that I could use for anything. If you have like an absolute ton of space, you can make it infinitely large. I think that there might be a data format that could accommodate that, but for useful purposes, like printing it out, making a stencil, like I would do, it would be extremely difficult to do that. Now, would it be easy to link to it in various ways or cause it to be displayed in various ways? Yes, totally. You could absolutely do that, like just linking to a text file and having, as soon as someone like taps on it, it just opens up the B movie script on their phone. So it's not as exciting as encoding the entire B movie script, but I find on these little QR codes that I'm able to go ahead and hand me one without angling it directly to the camera. No one needs to scan exactly what's on this QR code, guys. But if I were to take this QR code and try to fit the B movie script in it, we would have a lot of problems. It would just not work because this can only take about 400 characters before it gets, or at least this one I think takes about 400 characters before it gets maxed out. And it's the same deal with encoding on the Nugget. When we're using this tiny little screen, we can fit about 400 characters before we can't fit anymore. 400 characters is pretty good, though. For fitting inside a space that big, 400 characters is kind of crazy, especially with the level of error correction. So you can fit more data on a QR code by reducing the error correction, and that means you can make it so if a little bit of the QR code is damaged, maybe the whole thing doesn't read anymore. Normally, you can damage up to 30% of the QR code before it can't be read anymore. But in this case, I think you would just run out of space, unfortunately. So you can get some pretty big QR codes, but I don't think you can fit the whole B-movie script. I will try, though. It's going to make my computer hot.
Someone asks about the best word list. Ooh, one of my favorites is I still don't know how to say his last name, so don't cancel me. I think it's like Daniel Miesler,
Mm-hmm.
or something like that. His sec lists on GitHub, which we can link in the chat below, is really good. There's like top 10,000 passwords, 100,000, up into something like top 1 million passwords, as well as like different combinations of like leaked passwords and stuff like that. There's also like some great tools out there, like I think it's like there's some good password generators. I'm slipping on the names. I think one of them's like Buttercup or something. You probably know of some of those.
I definitely like the breach password list is really where to go. Like I find that password lists that are based on real breaches and then compiled, like breach compilations, would be my go-to. I usually find rather large breach compilations because people reuse passwords all the time. So rather than like randomly generate them or whatever, I love breach password lists because they have the best bang for your buck when it comes to at least Wi-Fi password cracking. At least for me, anyway.
Someone also mentions RockU, which I think is one of the defaults.
Oh yeah,
from
yeah,
Kelly.
yeah. So 2 rapid fire questions, one for Alex, one for me. Alex, what laptop are you both using? For me, would you rather have no girls or no money? Alex, you first.
Dang, that's a hard question. I don't know. I'll come back to that in a second.
Wait,
no girls or no money?
No, that's for me.
Oh,
Your
okay.
question is the laptops. That's not hard at all.
Great. Laptops. I'm using this ThinkPad of Kody's because I broke mine. Recommended laptop, honestly, one of the newer ThinkPads like the X1, those are great, or a Dell XPS, since those have better drivers for the built-in graphics card that I know works natively with Linux. Yeah, honestly depends what you're doing. And then I think Kody over here is using a Mac because he's real special.
It was free. And no girls. All right, next question.
All right, let me check out our stored questions. Yep. I can't believe they aren't using rolling codes. Okay, this sentiment is in regard to, I think it was like a Honda or Toyota hack or something like that. How much could it possibly cost? I'd swear they were being used in car alarms 20 plus years ago. Yeah, that was interesting because there's a vulnerability in certain newer models of like I think like Honda and Acura cars. Something as recent as like 2016 to like 2020 models where the remote start could be triggered since they were using... What's the opposite of a rolling code?
A repeating code.
Yeah, exactly. They were using like the same code over and over again. So essentially an attacker could just like listen for that code being beaconed from someone's key fob and then just like replay that to the car to start the engine. So I think that's ridiculous since rolling codes are an obvious and generally better implementation of that.
Someone asked in the chat also, can the Hack5 malicious cable detector by OMG detect the new OMG adapter? That's a question for MG. We should bring him back on the show. We had him on, I think, 2 weeks ago, and he was able to answer all sorts of OMG cable-related questions. So we should have him back on because I don't want to give the wrong answer on that one. But good question. I'll make sure to pass that along to our sources.
Yeah, someone says it's a weird issue to see in this millennium. Yeah, I'm surprised that like anyone's still using like static codes.
So one question is, how is your math subjects? I am not good in maths. I am also not good in maths. That's why I chose to go back and learn Python and do hardware stuff because I was able to bypass a lot of that and still do a lot of cool computer stuff. So yeah, my maths are not so good. Alex is actually far more advanced at maths than I am, yet he is very modest about it, which honestly makes me feel worse.
I'm very moderate at it, actually. I like barely passed high school math.
Yeah. So what was the last math class you took?
Calculus.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I took algebra 2, so that's great. You're
Nice.
so modest.
No.
Yeah, so like my last math class was algebra 2. So if that tells you anything about what kind of math you need to do in order to do some sorts of computer stuff, and don't feel bad about yourself because I'm sure you probably will exceed that level of math in your life. Thanks, Alex.
Yeah. Oh, we have a pretty meta question. I found your channel today. How often do you stream?
Once a week. So once a week on the Hack5 channel, and we also stream on the Security Forward channel, that's Security FWD, another time, and we go over the news every Friday. So if you want to check us out there, check out Security Forward, and you can also check out hackingwithfriends.com and find us there. Let's take the next question from the YouTube questions.
Great. Okay, there it is. Great show you have, guys.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Funky Monk. What method would you use to format an SD card in Kali? I fired up a Windows machine because it was easier to do. I think I use, is it Fdisk? I forget. I honestly forget. There's also a built-in partitioner. I think it's Gparted. I usually use that.
He's right though. It is annoying. I just use Mac OS has like a disk manager, and that's just what I use if I really need to do something quickly.
Someone also asks, does the Alpha AWUS 036 support monitor mode and packet injection?
I love the way Alpha Wireless names their products. It's so easy to remember what a string of characters this long means. I honestly don't remember what that device is. Alex, if you want to look it up real quick, how did you remember that? Oh, it's the one that looks like a manta ray, kind of, like with two antennas. Yeah, so if we look over on Alex's screen, this is the electronic device in question. It is one of the newer Alpha Wireless adapters, and typically these are used for Wi-Fi attacks, Wi-Fi monitoring, all that fun stuff. So, Alex, does this one support?
Yeah, we've actually used it before. It also does dual band, which is great, so you can hack stuff on 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz. Yeah, it also looks real cool.
All right. So let's take the next question. Oh, also another question from the chat. What do you guys do on a typical day? So that's a really good question. So one of the things that I do on a typical day is probably work for maybe like 2 to 3 hours or so on just pure research. So that's like making new Nugget features, 3D printing things and seeing if I can make sensors work with them, or otherwise doing stuff that's going to generate content in the future. Then I would say we spend another, on a day that we're not streaming, another like probably hour or two, like talking about content, planning out content, getting ready to do content, making sure we're releasing content, responding to your guys' questions, and generally getting ready. And then on a day that we stream, we spend about 2 hours, an hour on the stream and then an hour or so beforehand getting set up, actually working with the cameras, breaking down the set, setting up the set, setting up lights, making sure that when the sun goes down, everything doesn't get too dark. It's a lot of work. So our work is split between video production and cybersecurity and hacking and stuff. And we also, on the side, will go and do workshops. So we've already done one workshop in Los Angeles where we got to meet a bunch of really cool hackers and learn how to write their own Ducky scripts. And then we all got to take a whack at attacking a Raspberry Pi computer. And the winning team got a $200 Hack 5 gift card. So that was super cool.
Yeah,
so
that's cool.
Those are a bunch of things we do and we enjoy. Alex, what about you?
I would say we are chaotic. There's like generally no typical days. Can't really predict what's going on. I threw a wrench into things quite literally this week by like breaking our car in an attempt to fix it. So that's what I've been up to. But usually you can find me working on electronic stuff. The past few months, that's mostly been developing new software features for the Wi-Fi Nugget. Sometimes writing web applications. Lots of coding and hardware stuff, really. And then occasionally I'll be doing video stuff when we roll out videos for Hack 5, helping out with live streams, stuff like that. Constantly working. Yeah.
And you can often find us in coffee shops working on projects frantically while listening to K-pop or Brazilian hip-hop. So one question is, do you think hacking an iPhone is hard? And if so, yes or no, can you elaborate a little bit, please? So I have a Mac OS computer. I do not have an iOS phone. I find it a little annoying because I can't do the things I want to do anymore, and the methods of jailbreaking just don't work the same. So I'm not the biggest expert on iOS like exploits or attacking, but I have developed some payloads with the Ducky script payload system, and using any sort of thing like a like a Wi-Fi Nugget or a USB rubber ducky or anything that does these sorts of payloads, you can launch applications, install things, and very quickly use the built-in convenience features of the phone to give access to other users or add someone new to the phone or unlock authentication. So there's still some steps broken out that will prevent you from doing some of the most obvious things. But there's still a lot of room in there to use all the built-in accessibility features, to use a couple of moments of access to a phone like that to very quickly do something. So yeah, I would say if you're very familiar with iOS and you know all the convenience features, that's really all you need in order to bypass it using like an accessibility keyboard, because there are people that need to plug a keyboard into an Android phone in order to use it properly. So an iOS phone in order to use it properly. So they do support that. So it's kind of an interesting thing where I don't know if in the future there will be a password prompt or a fingerprint scan prompt in order to connect a new keyboard. That might annoy people, or it might prevent these sorts of human interface device attacks. But the human interface device attacks do work really well against mobile devices. A lot of people haven't plugged a keyboard into their phone and typed around and see what happens. But there's a lot of like weird hotkeys that I never expected that you can use in order to, abuse features of the phone, kind of live off the land and get it to do something that the owner would not be happy about. Now, can you just like fully, reverse engineer it and break it and do whatever? Like, I don't know how to do that, but I do know how to use payloads to use existing applications on the phone to do all sorts of bad things. What would you say?
I would say that I've actually seen like a lot less like vulnerabilities or like stuff like that for like the iPhone. I think that comes sort of like with the Apple ecosystem being like kind of proprietary. I think it is kind of generally harder to hack iPhone-based devices, but again, that's not really my territory, and I don't Apple-based devices, sorry, and I actually don't generally like know a lot when it comes to that. But yeah.
Okay, because he's very persistent, I will also shout out DJ
Shuffle.
Shuffle. And also thank Eric Nunez for also shouting out DJ Shuffle to calm him in our chat.
I was kind of distracted by...
by how many of those came
Yeah.
Yes, so you are welcome. So one question is, what can you say about cloud security and container security? So over at Varonis, they did a really interesting series on bypassing authentication on Box. And Box didn't exactly like this very much, so we had to scale it back a little bit. But it was, disclosed through a bug bounty program. And basically the problem was there was some ways that you could get around the two-factor authentication. And passwords are breached or phished all the time. So most of the time people just rely on these two-factor enrollment to take care of that and prevent any sort of bad thing from happening. But researchers were able to find a variety of different ways that you could modify web requests to basically totally bypass the two-factor authentication prompt. And that's really alarming, because if you're able to steal someone's password and then bypass their 2FA, you can do all sorts of stuff. And it's not just Box, it's all sorts of other services that could be vulnerable to this sort of failure to properly set up this MFA system. So some really interesting research going into MFA and cloud services that you can check out from the Varonis Threat Labs. I got to be one of the people doing the disclosure on it, and I got to make a little video summarizing the exploit. So if you want to see some cool research on cloud security, that's the last thing I got to work on that I was super floored by. Because as a beginner, I was able to totally understand how this worked and be like, oh, wow, well, that's bad. That shouldn't work that way. And realize that, cloud security is like that. You don't have controls in certain ways over the way the stuff is implemented. And it was fascinating to see that. So, of course, no shade on Box. Like, they do all sorts of stuff, and this is something that people do all the time. And to their credit, like, they went through the bug bounty system, they fixed everything, and everything is good. And, there was no real problem because they found out about it before it was abused. But, companies that don't have bug bounty programs that do cloud services have these sorts of issues all the time. So that's something to note, and that's why there are services out there for monitoring for when people start abusing this sort of stuff, like Varonis, because it happens so much and you have so little control over what the way that someone you're working with is deploying things like their MFA. So just a little interesting story about like cloud services. And I will say, like, containers are super interesting. We had a container expert on the show one time, and I learned a lot about Kubernetes, and I was wowed. And then I tried to run it on Mac OS, and it was not as easy as I was hoping. So I've been a little bit put off of containers just because of how hard it was to get started working with them myself, but they are super cool, and they do seem to have a lot of interesting security implications. I just don't know enough to speak on them too much.
That's ironic. They're supposed to be like easy to work with, but I find it like convoluted.
Yeah.
It's supposed to at least like clean up your environment and make it like easier to deploy tools and stuff like that. But it's
more
like,
consistency, less like custom environments. Yeah. I think it's an excellent idea, and for people who work with it all day, it's great. I just have been very lightly introduced into how to work with it on my own system.
Zach Langston says, I've been working at my school Dell laptop for weeks to get into the admin account. Should I quit or keep at it? Zach, send us your social security and your IP address, and also what school you go to, and we'll be sure to help you.
Yeah, the police will be in touch with you soon.
Yes.
Just as a reminder, if you are contemplating committing a crime or currently committing a crime, please do not admit it in public on our stream.
Using your real name.
Using your real name. Or a fake name even
Perhaps.
would probably not be the best idea. All right, let's take another question from the YouTube channel. I always like to reward people for listening to me when I say to go to the channel and leave a comment. So let's go there.
Alrighty. Here's a question for you. How does OWASP Zap compare to Burp Suite?
Excellent question. So, okay, over on my screen, let me go over to OWASP Zap. And you can see this is the page I was using to kind of take apart or attempt to take apart the phishing page that went after poor Nick earlier today. So this is a really powerful system that allows you to look at requests and responses. You're able to set breakpoints, and you're able to go through like previous things and kind of take a look and see exactly what happened with all the requests. So that stuff is really cool. It's really awesome. It lets you very quickly take apart like scamming websites or other things and find out exactly what's happening there, and even modify requests, open them in a browser. Now, here's the thing about OWASP Zap. It lacks good documentation. So today, I attempted to open up a browser and then kind of proxy stuff, and it just told me that it could not find, the supplied operating system was not found. Or the supplied browser was not found. And this was for Firefox, for Chrome, for Safari. It just would not open anything. And I only found one issue with no real good responses like to this, and it was very annoying to figure out what was going wrong. So the benefit of OWASP Zap is it's free and it's just as powerful as services like Burp Suite. The dark side of that is there's no information about problems sometimes, and you will just find that something is so poorly documented. You were watching a video from literally 6 years ago to figure out how like a basic feature that should be thoroughly documented works. So that's my only complaint with OWASP Zap. Aside from that, it's super powerful, super cool, and I really love using it. I think it's like a super excellent way of getting started with this sort of web application pen testing, and there are great resources out there, and I'm trying to put out more. So if you guys want to see more OWASP Zap videos, then I will continue doing them because I really like it. I think it's a great program, and it's free, so you don't got to sign up for anything.
Someone asks, is a gang stalking a cybersecurity job?
It depends. And I'm going to steer very clear of that question.
I'm sorry for reading that.
I have been advised by our lawyers to not answer that question.
Yes. Oh, someone asks, in OWASP Zap, can we do intruder stuff? So
yeah,
I assume that means like breaking into web apps or stuff like that.
No, so intruder is
Or is that a tool?
Yeah, that's a tool.
Oh, okay.
So intruder is a burp intruder is a tool within Burp Suite that allows you to automate certain attacks and do certain permutations in your web request. So let's say that you wanted to brute force something. Well, you could use burp intruder to select a variable and then select all the different things you're going to pass through that variable so that you can go through an entire list and brute force something. And that's just a very interesting tool. And yes, you can totally do the same kind of thing, only in Burp Suite it's called fuzzing. So over on my screen, if we take a look at this, if I have all these requests here and I want to do some essentially fuzzing, or in Burp Suite invadering, as we would say Burp Suite, I can right mouse click on it and I can go to attack and then fuzz. And this is basically this, I'm not going to say it's the same thing as in Invader, because there are some other things you can do there that I don't think you can do here or haven't found out how to do it. But I can do the basic stuff. Like I can take something like this and make it a variable. I can start adding word lists here, add a payload to it, like strings, or I can generate numbers from 0 to whatever. So yeah, you can totally do a lot of the stuff that I thought you could actually only do in Invader. It just takes a little bit of uncovering. You got to do a little digging for your free software. But I'm a big proponent of OWASP Zap now, if only because for a while the Burp Suite people weren't giving me a license. I'm trying to make a video about it. Like, let me just show other people how to use this thing. So I haven't had to contact anybody to download OWASP, but you just download it, So the barrier to entry being so low is another reason I highly suggest beginners check out OWASP Zap. All right, let's take another question.
Someone says, I know you guys say you see the comments throughout the week or whatever. All right.
Okay.
Thanks for the sass.
No,
I finally thought of an actual question.
Okay.
Good for you.
Yeah.
What is your actual job title? Because I'm starting to wonder if you all got like the coolest job in the world or definitely one of, and then there's an ellipses.
Wait, there was no sass in that at all. That was a super nice question.
If it started off sassy. Okay.
I think you're reading it. But anyway, thank you for the very nice question. Alex, what's your job title?
Security guy.
Great.
Hardware hacker. I don't know, actually.
All right. Well,
I guess cybersecurity content creator. I've never really thought about that.
Yeah, I think that would fit. And for me, I am a security researcher. Of course, I focus on content creation and sharing, but I really like cybersecurity researcher because it means anything I'm doing could potentially be research. So it really kind of writes off a lot of the suspicious stuff I do. But on a day-to-day basis, like we said, we're generally working together on hardware, software projects, or creating content, or talking about creating content, or planning on creating content. So most of what we do is based around creating content, and it's a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah.
All right, next question.
Cool. Someone comments on the B-movie OWASP Zap video. This is a hell of a lot of fun. Thank you. But why the B-movie script? Just a personal preference, or am I missing something?
So there was another alternative text which I originally wanted to send to the scammer over and over and over, but there were two problems with it. The first question was that it was copyrighted, like excessively so, and I feel like, like I could get in trouble if I was sending that one over and over. This one, the B-movie script was already on GitHub. It's very common to send this. It's almost kind of already a hacker meme. The second problem, that it was a lewd story about Clippy, the paperclip that helps you in Microsoft Word. Someone wrote a story on the internet about Clippy.
Oh, it's more than a story. It's a fantasy.
We're not going to talk about what it is.
Right.
But let's just say that was the text I wanted to use, and I was unable to both get the legal authorization and also find a plain text version of this story, which I will not name. You can Google it yourself. But no, the B-movie script was actually not my first choice. There was a different one that I was planning on sending, but I was talked out of it and also could not find the plain text version. All right.
Great. Let's take another question. This one we answered already, but what if the scammer was logging the IP address and just removed everything from the address or just blocked it? Yeah, there's ways that you can automatically change stuff like the browser agent, the forwarded by IP address, and stuff like that.
Yeah, you could potentially also use VPNs if you had a VPN network or a botnet. Then of course you could get around that. But yeah, that's great.
Oh, we have a question. Also on the same video, where can I get Alex's phishing simulator site to try this on my own Raspberry Pi?
All right, so we got a little bit of negative neutral feedback that was like, hey, you guys just basically built a phishing site. How is this good? Well, in order for us to show off how this attack worked out, we wanted to show a very, very stripped down version of what a scammer's kind of database collection system could look like, or what the back end of their server would look like for a phishing website. So we wanted to build something that was so dumb that you would already need to know a lot about web design to turn this into a real phishing website and deploy it somewhere. Except just on your local server, if you wanted to poke around at this on your own network. Now, if you wanted to deploy this, it really wouldn't be a very good phishing website. Yeah. You should not be using a .csv file, to store your results. You should be using a SQL database. There's just all sorts of things you would actually want to do very differently if you were doing a real phishing campaign. So this is the most watered down, neutered version of a phishing website. This is basically just a website that logs input to a CSV file, and that is it. So there's nothing sophisticated here at all. We're not selling secrets of the dark arts or anything. This is just a website that logs input to a CSV file. And we say phishing on it, so make it very obvious this is a fake phishing page. So if you were to take that and transform it into a real phishing website, you obviously already know how to make a phishing website. So I don't feel like we're helping you that much. All right, just had to preface that.
Yeah, regardless, you can still find that on my GitHub. If you switch over to my screen, that's over at github.com/my name, which is Alex Lind /cryptoscammockup. Also, someone earlier asked about an old GitHub repository I contributed to, which was the ESP8266 war driving GitHub repository, and they asked about why some feature didn't work, why it wasn't logging to the CSV file but only committing the wiggle header. That's usually resultant of an error where if the GPS isn't initiated yet with the microcontroller, it'll start out by just logging the header but not writing any GPS coordinates or anything to the CSV file, since it hasn't detected any yet.
All right, 2 rapid fire questions from the chat. One of them is, what is your advice to people who are just getting into hacking? I recommend learning about networking, learning about Linux, learning about bash scripting /PowerShell, and then teaching other people what you learn. So explaining what you know to other people, teaching others that are just getting started. I find that to be the best way of making sure you really understand a subject. That's my advice. Alex?
I was distracted by a question that almost made me laugh. I'm sorry.
All right, question is, what would your advice be to people who are just getting into hacking? Go.
Honestly, just find a project that you really want to do and learn about how all the intricacies of it work. I'd say honestly, take an existing piece of software, figure out how it works and how you can modify it. That's really the best way.
Yeah, that's good. Not to spam, I'm just wondering from a professional standpoint, is there something newer and more fleshed out than Kali Linux, or is Kali the best? So it depends. The reason Kali is the best is because it has the best documentation for beginners. If you're running into problems and you don't know what you're doing, then it's really a bummer if nobody has ever run into this problem before. And you'll find that sometimes happens if you're on an operating system that hasn't been like kind of treaded on as much as Kali Linux has. Lots of people have tried to run this on lots of crazy things and have got lots of error and bug reports resolved, which is good for you because it means there's probably a solution to your problem. If you're out there running Manjaro on a Raspberry Pi, like maybe not that many people do it, and maybe it's a little harder to get the answers you're looking for. So do I think Manjaro is awesome on the Raspberry Pi or for security stuff? Yeah. Do I necessarily recommend it to a beginner? No, I wouldn't. And that would just kind of be my general advice. Of course, Parrot Security OS is an awesome operating system that's very similar to Kali Linux in lots of ways and is gaining, I would say, like the same community in terms of being able to offer really good solutions for people that run into problems. But I would say Kali is probably still the one with better documentation. So Parrot Security OS coming up very close behind it, but they're both Debian-based systems. So I find the experience to be very similar using both.
Yeah, Kali like started out as like a purist like hacker operating system, but then they started like playing catch up for a while to Parrot, because like Parrot, the appeal for that I feel like was, in addition to having like hacking tools, you could also like do regular desktop stuff, like you could do word processing and whatnot. But then Kali implemented like a like regular privilege like user thing like from the default installation, and they're also like adding all these features that let you just use that as a more casual operating system. But I think Kali by far still has a lot more support.
Cool. So one person says, I'm currently taking the Google IT cert. It's honestly great. I work at my own pace. And I'm going to be taking the Google Python cert after this. I actually was taking the Google IT cert as well, right before I went back to school for routing and switching. I ended up liking routing and switching more just because it was in person back then. But the Google IT classes, I believe those are free, and they do have lots of great information. So that's a great resource, and I wanted to shout that out because I saw that in the comments, and I like that too.
Yeah, someone asks, well, we're getting a lot of questions actually about our 3D printers. What 3D printers are we using? We have 2 Ender 3 version 2s, and then we have 1 regular Ender 3, the first generation, with some slight modifications.
And then back at the home base, we also have a CR30, which is the belt printer that continuously can just print out things at a 45-degree angle and then kind of pop them off of a belt into a bucket, which is how we produce the D-pads on our Wi-Fi Nugget. Fun fact. We have one printer exclusively dedicating to making D-pads only. Where can I get all the stickers on our laptops? In order to get all of these, you would need to travel the world.
You would need to fight us.
Yeah, or fight us. Or just be the replacement person at the Apple store anytime I bring my stuff in for any sort of repair. They're always like, oh, do you care that we just completely replace all those stickers? I'm like, ah. But yes, at least I get to start all over again, so it's okay. These stickers are from all over the place, but I would say if you go to the C3 conference and DEF CON, you'll be able to get probably 75% of the stickers on these laptops. CCNA or Network Plus?
I was trying to sort of half study for the CCNA for a while. There's some good material there. I honestly can't speak too much about the Network Plus certification. I also don't think I'm in a position to talk about it as much, but I would say honestly learning the coursework and the material that people need in order to prepare for these exams has honestly helped me a lot to get an understanding of networking and also how a lot of core internet infrastructure works. So even if you aren't going to get certified, I'd say learning the curriculum for these things will definitely help improve your understanding of hacking topics.
Yeah, I also say someone said the Ender 3 has a huge community of people that are modding these, and absolutely, we use Octoprint, so huge shout out to Octoprint and Gina, who maintains Octoprint, who I still believe was in one of my workshops at C3, and that's so cool because we use Octoprint for everything, and she's great. But yes, Octoprint is amazing. It automatically makes your 3D printer so much more useful. It does everything from automatically create a video compilation of what happened in your print, so you can see exactly where something went wrong, all the way to allowing artistic stuff. So Alex actually had a high definition camera pointed at it and managed to make a really awesome timeline of the print just appearing from thin air. You can do artistic stuff, you can do remote monitoring stuff. It's so cool. So yeah, I really, really enjoy how much fun it is to use 3D printers with Octoprint, and I do not enjoy how much fun it is to try to get away with using 3D printers without it.
Someone says, are 3D printers safe around kids? I mean...
No.
I guess not.
No. They're barely safe around me. I would not have a 3D printer around a child that was too young to leave around a fireplace. I would say 3D printers are the same level of danger as a fireplace. It's a hot surface that moves around. It can pinch you. It can burn you. So I would not
That sounds great.
Ew. Okay, well, I'm sorry. Okay, but anyway, like, yeah, so I would not leave a child, like, out around a 3D printer because the nozzle can get upwards of, like, 220, like, degrees Celsius, and that would seriously burn you if you were to grab it while it was moving.
I have so many scars that are, like, a testament to these awful machines.
Yeah.
Someone asked, how fast can you guys type?
Alex?
Pretty dang fast.
Alex recently took a typing test. What was your result?
It was, like, 126, I think. How about you?
I don't remember. Yeah, I don't remember. All right, let's take another one from the YouTube channel. And we're kind of getting up pretty close to when we're going to be done. So if you have a burning question, 2 ways of getting us to see it. A, drop it in the chat. We'll try to answer it in the last 5 minutes or so we have. And B, go ahead and leave it on our YouTube channel because as you can see, we're going through all the different comments we got on our YouTube channel and making sure to try to answer the best ones. So we will see it if you leave it on the YouTube channel as a comment. So if you don't get yours answers today, that is how you can make sure that we will answer it next time.
Someone asks, are you going to learn how to break Neuralink once it comes out? I think that's that Elon Musk, like, brain implant thing.
Oh, yeah. No, I can't wait to fuzz the brain implant and see what comes out of the dark recesses of someone's mind. You know, techniques like fuzzing and, like, you know, using artificial intelligence to, like, figure out inputs or a black box, like, really becomes much more creepy when you think about, like, violating the sanctity between like man and machine. So yeah, it'll be interesting to run some fuzzing on that Neuralink when it comes out. If anybody has one and wants to donate their, volunteer to let us use their brains for some light fuzzing, please let us know.
I would just like hack someone's brain to play Tata. Just this great Armenian singer we discovered.
Okay. Oh, yeah. We can't talk about...
yes. All right.
We will talk about...
You're going to keep Tata to yourself? All right, fine.
We will talk about the king of Armenian pop another time. All right. Would you recommend building a supercluster with the newest Raspberry Pis? Is there any benefit to it in the long run? It's a hobby project, you know, honestly, because you can with online services like AWS and other types of service, you can easily get that kind of computing power for like a very less than it would cost to buy the Raspberry Pi, unless you're doing something continuously that needs it. I would say it's a hobby project that can be really cool and it's fun to do, but I don't know. I can't think of any real reason to have one that would be super pressing, but maybe someone else in the chat can.
For a while, I wanted to get into that. I'd say it doesn't have like any good applications really, because like honestly, the Raspberry Pi still has like a processor that's like about equivalent to like an old like phone from like 2010, and like strapping them together doesn't do a whole lot besides just like teach you about like distributed computing if you want to get into that.
Where can I learn about testing on web apps hosted in the cloud, VPN, CDN, load balancer, layer 7 pen testing? Okay, I can only answer the first one. So I know that Portswigger has really excellent cloud-hosted vulnerable web applications where you can learn how to attack them. And guess what? You can totally use OWASP Zap for them, which I have done multiple times. So it's really cool to be able to very quickly go through and learn different techniques of breaking into a web application. I highly recommend portswigger.net just because they have a great academy that has all these things that are hosted online and you can access them from anywhere when it's up. So another person asked if there's a good Wi-Fi CTF. Oh, perhaps you're talking about the Chicken Man game. So one of my favorite projects I worked on with my friend Brandon was a project called the Chicken Man game. And this was a project to use an ESP8266 in order to make a community CTF you could play with friends, or you could play with, we originally did it for our computer science group at Pasadena City College and hosted a CTF. You vamp for a second while I look it up.
Yeah, the Chicken Man game. If I recall correctly, it's like a game that lets you practice like Wi-Fi hacking using the ESP8266.
There we go. We can switch to my screen. Good job. All right. So as you can see, this is the Chicken Man game, and I'm shocked that it has 138 stars. But this uses a Raspberry Pi and then a couple of ESP8266s to create an access point and clients. So it's designed so that the access points are being joined by the clients every so often and are generating Wi-Fi handshakes. And everybody who's playing the game needs to try to crack those handshakes as quickly as possible so they can score points. So we even made it so that when we finally did this, there was a big long NeoPixel strip, and that NeoPixel strip would change according to which team was winning, the red team or the blue team. So it would start to shift towards the red team or towards the blue team as one team scored more points. So yeah, this is a really cool game. You can kind of go through it and see it. You can use it. You can see that it's relatively set up with a couple microcontrollers and a couple parts, and it comes with some great graphics. Look, I made this specifically for the chicken sitting on the minigun for this project. So yeah, I would say the Chicken Man game is great. And as you can see, this chicken's looking for some smoke, riding on the minigun, and it's a great game. So yes, I recommend my own Chicken Man game if you want to check it out. It's a Wi-Fi CTF myself and Brandon created to avoid needing to do deauthentication in places like, a school club, where if you deauthenticate the wrong Wi-Fi network, you could get everyone kicked out and banned from ever doing CTFs there again. So it does not use deauthentication. It does teach about Wi-Fi cracking, and it's a lot of fun to play. We did this at a couple different conferences, including, I think, Layer 1, and a lot of people had fun playing it. So yeah, maybe it'll work for you too.
Someone asks, what knowledge do you need to know before trying a CTF? That honestly depends, because there's like a lot of different types of CTFs that are out there. Like this one specifically is for like Wi-Fi hacking. Yeah, it honestly depends what area of hacking you're looking to get into.
Yeah, one person points out the Chicken Man game is also pretty basic. Yeah, I would say this has kind of limited replay value. Obviously you can automate it and hack really fast, and once you learn how the game works, your third or fourth time playing it, you're gonna what I call slam the game and make it so you make it through so fast that people can't really compete with you if it's their first time. So the learning curve here is very, very short. You learn how to play it and then suddenly you're awesome at it. But the point here is that that's also actually just how Wi-Fi hacking works. So you just learned how to hack Wi-Fi and became pretty good at it within 2 runs of this game. So I think it's just, of course, yeah, it is easy to learn, and then it's a little less fun when you're so good at it. It's pretty short, but it's also awesome to get beginners to go from, I don't know how to do this, to, dang, I'm pretty good at this within 1 or 2 plays of the game. So that's kind of the point. But yeah, we can probably make it more complicated. And in the future, we're looking at creating some more Wi-Fi CTFs where you have to scan Wi-Fi, find the victim computer trying to connect to an old Wi-Fi network, create that fake Wi-Fi network, get the device to connect to you, hack into the web interface, and then do something more. So we're looking at making it a little bit more challenging and having a slightly more elaborate CTF in the future that has elements of web hacking and then web application pen testing too. So stay tuned for that. If you guys want it, let us know, because we love doing CTFs. It's a lot of fun. It's kind of like a free workshop too. So we can totally do that. And I've already made a couple of vulnerable web applications for the Wi-Fi Nugget as well, which is kind of edging into that territory. So there you go.
We have a question about, someone asks, have you tried to do any hacking with the new Tensor chip on the new Pixel phones?
They keep asking that. So no, I actually just got a new Pixel that has a Tensor, and I have a 65 gigabyte signal backup that will not transfer it. So I'm currently carrying around 2 Pixel phones because one of them was damaged in an explosion while testing a 3D printed firework launching tube. So now that the back of it has been smashed by shrapnel, I have this new Pixel, the Pixel 6 something, that is not set up and has none of my Signal contacts, so I can't use it. So I'll let you know as soon as I get things transferred over, and if you work at Signal, please fix this.
Dang. Someone also asks if we have any new hardware that we're rolling out, and also if we're planning on doing any more stuff with warjiving. Yeah, so we've been working on developing more new features for the S2 based Wi-Fi Nugget, but we're talking about also having add-ons, for example, a GPS add-on, so that way you could do warjiving with it, and some other sensor expansion packs for the Wi-Fi Nugget. So yes, we do want to get more into warjiving. A while back, we also did a video on using the ESP8266 for warjiving, and it's basically the exact same plug-and-play chip that's on the Wi-Fi Nugget that we also used for that video. So we're planning on adding more support for the Wi-Fi Nugget, so that way you can use the onboard screen and stuff to interface with a warjiving program and make it really easy to deploy.
Okay, someone says more about the 3D printed firework tube. So our good friend Nick has been developing a 3D printed firework launcher that's designed to be electronically fired, so it can be fired at a safe distance on the 4th of July. And we've been testing it out a little bit and trying to make sure that it is in fact safe. And one of the core questions was, what happens if the firework fails to leave the tube? This happens all the time when a kid launches a firework, drops it in upside down, and then the kicker charge is supposed to pop it up, instead just pushes it down into the bottom of the tube, and then it explodes, usually destroying the tube and sending a shower of fiberglass everywhere. So it was our conclusion that 40% PLA plus, 40% infill PLA plus, is enough to cause extensive injuries, damage equipment, and send anybody within about 2 meters to the hospital, because the material is so much stronger and flies in fragments that are larger than fiberglass. So do I recommend using a 3D printed firework launcher, even at low infill? No, I don't. Ask my knee why. I have a cut this big. So it was our conclusion that it is far too dangerous to use a material like PLA Plus for the sort of firework launching, unless you do it from a far distance away, because it is too strong and can pick up too much kinetic energy and flies in too large of pieces to be useful for prototyping this sort of thing. Of course, if it doesn't explode, then everything's fine. But if it does explode, you're probably going to go blind. So I do not currently recommend this project for safety reasons. It is a little scary, actually. So yeah.
Someone says, "Can't you just buy a normal firework?" Jesus, dude. No,
yeah, but
boring.
you can't electrically fire a normal firework from a distance from a computer that counts down so you feel like NASA. Okay, like that's my goal, and we did it last year. We're just trying to, or a couple years ago, we're just trying to up the resiliency on it, and it's just a fun kind of hardware hacking project. Is there any way I can make my own Wi-Fi router? Okay, this is probably going to be one of the last questions we answered, but we have been using the ESP8266, this little tiny chip right here, to create what's called a NAT router. Alex, what's a NAT router?
It's basically a router that allows you to extend like your Wi-Fi connection. Usually, it's called a network address translation type router. So like the usual setup is like you'll connect to this router. That router connects to like your like home router. So basically, it acts as like a relay for Wi-Fi traffic.
Common thing would be a network extender.
Yeah,
like it basically functions exactly like a network extender that's creating a different network name, but it's connected back to your home network. So this little chip can actually act as a router, and you can connect devices to it. And is the speed great? No, it's not great, but I can still watch a low quality version of a Rickroll video on it, so it does work. So some people use it for connecting IoT devices, so that there's a lower risk network that's kind of exposed out there. But you can also use it as a lab in order to connect devices to it and then attack them, or connect to a web interface on them, because this does like routing, so it does allow you to access other devices that are on this network, and sometimes that's all you need to do in order to have a network to attack on. So I would say these little microcontrollers, the ESP32 and the ESP8266, when used as a NAT router, is super cool. And if you're familiar with Arduino IDE, you can open this up, load this board in there, and take a look at the examples, and the NAT router is actually included. So all you need to do is put in your Wi-Fi credentials, put that sketch on this board, and it will create a little router for you. Cheapest router I know of is this little guy right here. Of course, you do need a Wi-Fi network already set up for this to connect back to. You don't see an Ethernet port on this, do you? So obviously it needs a data connection in order to supply that. But the fact that this can do two things at the same time, both connect back to a different network and create its own kind of like safe network for you to hack or connect other devices to, is pretty cool, honestly.
Yeah, it depends what application you're using it for, of course. There's like stuff that's a little more sophisticated, like deploying like OpenWRT on like a Raspberry Pi or something like that, that would give you like a full-fledged router. But if you want to just get started with like Wi-Fi hacking and practice like capturing traffic, then a setup with like the ESP microcontroller would be perfect.
Also, James points out that if you're trying to do the project we tried to do with fireworks with PVC, that is also a very bad choice. I would definitely agree. That sort of like higher density plastic flying at high speed and shards would be very unpleasant. So yeah, do not, we did this so that you guys don't do it. Please do not make 3D printed firework launchers. It is a bad idea. Okay, I think that this is just about all the time we have for questions. So if you've got a killer question, if you just came into the stream, make sure to leave it as a comment on the YouTube video. We will make sure to go through them just like we went through the videos from the questions from last week's video, because we love the questions you guys have to ask us, and it's great to connect with the community. So yeah, Alex, thank you for making time away from your research and car work to update us on this.
Of course.
And also thank you to everyone in the chat. It's good to check in with everyone, get some feedback and some new ideas for content next week. So, of course, you can check us out on the Security Forward channel, where we will be on our Friday news stream. So make sure to subscribe to us there. And we'll see you next week for our next Q&A hacking session. Alex, see you later.
Yep.